Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our webinar. We are excited to have Novia's own Jim Augustine here today. He will be presenting on Notes from the Field, Warehousing. I know you're all eager to get started with this presentation, so before we begin, as a reminder, we are recording this webinar and we'll be posting it on our on-demand webinar library for you to review and share with others. If you have any questions during our presentation, please feel free to type them into the questions box, and we will answer them at the end of our session during our Q&A. Now I'm going to turn it over to Jim to kick off his presentation.
Thanks, Joe, and hello to everybody. Good afternoon, good morning, depending on your time zone. Thanks for taking the time to join me today. My name is Jim Augustine, and I am a client engagement specialist, otherwise known as an account manager. I'm here at Innovia. I've been here now a couple of years. I've been in the dynamics space, pretty much my entire consulting career. And prior to that, I spent some time at different distribution companies, consumer products principally. And so I've been around working in warehouses for quite a while. And it's actually the area that I really like the most when it comes to the implementation side and the consulting side of this industry that we get to play in. So once again, thanks for taking some time. Today's topic is notes from the field. So what I like to do is bring in some experienced consultants that work in this day to day, ask them some questions, rely on some of my own experience. I do a lot of reading on various supply chain white papers and things like that, publications. So I try to kind of consolidate those all down into what I call my top 10 list. Those of you that are keeping track will note that at the end of this, there might have been more than 10, but some things kind of always pop in. So, and so these are presented in kind of no particular order. I am going to start off with some general thoughts, and then we'll look specifically at some business central recommendations and setups and just a couple of things to think about. This is not a comprehensive warehousing 101 webinar. We do those. We do have one coming up, and at the end we'll take a look at some of the other events that are coming. So stay tuned for those. And we do have a class on warehousing, I believe, scheduled in December as well. If you are kicking the tires on Business Central warehousing and want a comprehensive class, then I'll show you on the website where you can look into information on that. Once again, thanks for taking your time today. And as always, if you have any questions, just go ahead and type them in the Q&A panel and or in the chat panel, either one. And Joe will read them off to me as we go. Okay, so in no particular order, this is the one that I am pretty passionate about, and it's one that I'll spend the most amount of time on here this morning. So first one is to cycle count. If you're running a warehouse, there's going to be needs for physical inventories. There's no question about that. And we see a lot of companies that still are doing the yearly count and dealing with the extra labor, the inaccuracies, and the recounting. And we really would encourage you to consider activating and creating a cycle count program in lieu of a full physical inventory. And when you're doing that, you want to think about different ways, different strategies around creating the cycle counts. You can identify your inventory by slow or fast movers. You can identify groups of inventory by high and low value and count those at a different frequency. But we strongly recommend that you consider counting an area of your warehouse. Figure out, do you have pick faces that require more frequent counting, or bulk storage requires less? But to count an area rather than counting for a specific item. The challenge, of course, with counting a specific item is if something is misplaced, you spend a lot of time looking for it. If you're counting an area, you divide your warehouse up into different logical areas and have different count frequencies, you're sure to catch everything in that area, additions, subtractions, and so on. It adds into the normal workflow of the day for what the guys are doing in the warehouse, and it just makes it more straightforward. So counting an area is sure to capture everything, and when a robust cycle counting program, you'll find that you really will reduce your shortages. The advantage in cycle counting is, of course, is it's efficient. It really is a low daily impact to your operations. You will detect errors much more quickly than if you're waiting for a full physical, which ultimately reduces your cost and requires fewer resources. And there is a significant body of white papers out there that talk about the advantages of cycle counting. I don't know, I've read probably maybe 50 or 60 articles from different publications over the years that talk about this particular topic. So there's a great body of work out there that indicates a cycle count program is much better than a full physical, and we really would encourage you to look at doing something along those lines instead of the full physicals. And of course, inside Business Central and NAV, there's ways to accomplish that as well. Okay, next. I neglected to thank the folks on my team that helped me put this together, John Grant, Kevin Fons, and Andre Bruskelis. Those are three of our top consultants here at Innovia that give me some impact as well, or information that impacts this webinar. And this one actually came in from John. I like it. It's a new one to me. So if you've got your warehouse divided up into bins, single bin, single item. When you mix items onto a large bin, the operator has to search, which means you've got reduced productivity and when they're trying to find items to pick or count or whatever it is they're looking for. You can see in the picture here, let me advance this, that this area right here, there's a shelf label, there's should be a barcode there to identify which shelf and which bin we're on. But then if you look around, you will see that there are some different items. So if I need this item and this is where I'm supposed to go get it, it means I have to poke around until I find it. So if you've got shelving or racking like this and you don't have a physical barrier in between the items, that's okay. Just put different labels on and identify each shelf, each bin. So the operator can go quickly and find the areas they're looking for. And this is the items they're looking for. This is true if you're using wireless or if you're using paper-based. It just makes it much more effective. Now, in this picture, you can see really this, not that. So this is what we really would like to see you do. If I focus in on this warehouse, you can see it's a little bit difficult. I couldn't find a really great picture, but these barcodes are different that represent the items underneath. And looking at the size of the boxes, you might even think that this item here is the same as that item there. Could very well be. They're stacked in a similar way, but we still have a different bin identifier for where to go to find the product. So much faster and more efficient for the user to find what they're looking for. So different shelf, different bin, even though they're in between the major pallet racks on the shelves. So thanks for that for John. This one's kind of obvious. Your number 4, your fast movers. Keep your fast movers closest to the packing stations. And why is that? Well, we know that the most expensive transaction in the warehouse, besides changing the battery on the wireless device, is walking. And so if I'm walking the least amount of time for my fastest moving items, deliver them to the packing stations where they're ultimately either packaged or labeled and shipped, it just reduces the amount of time that I have to spend walking around. If you're inside NAV or Business Central, you might need some help with identifying what your fast movers are, and you might consider a customized report to help identify those and reset your warehouse depending upon the timing for how quickly your items turn over, quarterly, yearly, semi-yearly, something like that. And one time I was working with a customer that was in the kind of the promotionals business, and they had 2 seasons. They had the Christmas season, and their warehouse was stocked full of Christmas-oriented product, and then they had their summer seasons. So they reset their warehouse twice a year. Obviously, they bulked up in summer for their Christmas delivery season, and then in early winter for their summer delivery season. and they reset it all the time. And they even within that area identified which ones of those seasonal products was the fastest and the slowest. So move them closer to your packing station, and it's just a much more efficient way to operate. This next one I cannot spend enough time on, really. Document your procedures, standardize your processes. Like so many times we go into a warehouse and different product lines have different procedures, and there's really not necessarily a good reason to do that. So standardize the processes as much as possible. And this next one, design processes to your newest employee. You don't want your most experienced employee designing the business processes in your warehouse. Certainly they can contribute, but you do need to get some help from your newest employees, because those are the people that are going to struggle the most to learn and to understand business processes. Your most experienced employees certainly can contribute into how things are designed and how things work, but you really want to think about someone coming in fresh. And I read this the other day, actually. I was reading something, and it said, hey, ask a friend to come in and pick an order. And I thought, that's interesting. So if you can invite a friend to come in and pick an order, they should be able to accomplish that quickly. They should be able to accomplish that without a whole lot of asking for questions or information. If they can do that, then you've accomplished your goal of keeping things simple, keeping things well organized. Good customer service begins in the warehouse. And if someone can come in and help you do that very, very quickly, then you know the warehouse is providing good customer service, and your customer service folks will appreciate that as well. And when it comes to the orders, my advice would be to check the order twice or more. Check it before it gets out to the warehouse. It is far easier to correct a mistake on an order before it hits the warehouse than it is to correct it in the warehouse. And I have a figure that's a few years old, admittedly, probably not up to date on labor rates, but we know that the cost of misshipping an order was about $115 a few years ago. $115 comes from the customer receiving the product and you've paid for freight. Now the customer opens it and finds out it's the wrong item, or one item wrong. Now they got to do an RMA process that involves customer service, either through a website or a phone or something. So now they're involved. Now we have to either allow them to keep the product, which is a write-off, or in some cases you'll ask the customer to ship the product back. So that comes back in. We've got to receive it. We've got to check it in. We've got to validate it's the right item. Did we really sell this item, and so on. So all of the work that comes in to update or to correct an order, it's much better to catch it before it goes out the door. So make sure that we're designing the processes for that level of understanding and to catch the mistakes as soon as possible. We'll talk about picking in just a minute, and there's some times to catch mistakes before we pick as opposed to before we pack. And that's another kind of process to work in. So standardize and document your procedures. Now we're going to jump into kind of some business central sort of stuff, things that are related directly to Nav and to Business Central. Obviously, it's a Business Central world now, so we'll jump into the some things that are specifically related to how you might set things up and choices that you might make. So first of all, keep it simple. Turn on the minimum amount that's required or the minimum amount that's needed. And what we have here, let me zoom in just a little bit. So what do we have? This is obviously Business Central. This is a view of a location, which inside Business Central is a logical location, which can be a physical warehouse, but it's also a logical warehouse. There are times when we have customers that have the same physical warehouse with multiple locations. That's a conversation for a later time. But in this case, this is a location, and there are settings that we can choose to turn on the various activities in our warehouse. You can see here, require receive, require shipment, require put away, require pick. Am I using bins? Something called directed put away and pick. And these are all options that I can turn on and turn off. Very often we see customers says, I'm just going to turn everything on, and I'm going to use all the activities, but do they really need to? If I'm receiving and I can put things away into a bin right there on the purchase receipt, then don't require or don't turn on the require put away step. It adds an extra step into the workflow and complicates things. So keep it as simple as your business requires. Of course, if you've got a very complicated warehouse and you need a lot of the full functionality, obviously go ahead and turn it on. But think about it first and don't turn something on just because you can. Now, a note here about directed pick and put away. Oh, let me shrink that down here. So the directed pick and put away, avoid directed pick and put away in production locations. This one you could create an argument for. In some cases, it's a requirement. And inside Business Central, let me back up just one step. When we make that option, as you can see here, I've got that one turned on. Directed put away and pick enables basically everything inside Business Central for warehousing. So when I receive product, I'm required to receive it. Then I'm required to put it away into its storage location. When I ship product, I'm required to create a warehouse shipment, create a pick ticket, and process those activities. But this also extends down into the production environment. If I'm pulling raw materials to assembled in some way using a production order, and I store those in bins, it does turn on those activities. There are some limitations, and the limitations particularly are not a challenge, but they would require some customization to how we would configure your Business Central environment, particularly overconsumption. It's very common that customers will store raw materials in a unit of measure larger than what I might need for a particular production order. Think of vats of a chemical or pallets worth of a product, and I want to pull the whole product. Well, on the production order, if I need 1,000 of the components, but I've got a pallet full with 1,500, NAV doesn't do, or Business Central doesn't do a really great job of allowing you to overpick for that consumption. And we see that very, very often. So overpicking, of course, it could be customized around if need be, if I have a good reason to turn on the directed put away and pick setting. But if you don't need it, then avoid that. Now, you can set up multiple locations in your physical warehouse. You could have a physical location with one set of parameters, and your distribution warehouse section could be turned on with the full directed put away and pick. So there's ways and strategies to deal with that, but think about it carefully in the production environment. And of course, whichever consultant you're working with can shed more light and more detail on that particular conversation. The other thing that I like to point out is this is something I see regularly. The junior people first get assigned to receiving, and I think that is not necessarily the best choice. Receiving is more complicated. Generally, you've got a smaller receiving area than other areas, so space is limited. You need to move product quickly in and out of the receiving area, and sometimes receiving is not as straightforward as we'd like it to be. Vendors make mistakes when they ship you product, and it requires a bit more research and a bit more understanding. So put your senior people in receiving, pay them well, and keep them retained. Okay, this is a very specific setup option in the warehouse setup. This is warehouse setup is, you can see right here, the warehouse setup option is where we have some very basic settings for how Business Central treats activities. And I've got here, there's two fields, receipt posting and shipment posting. There's two options there. Posting errors are not processed, and stop and show the first posting error. I know it sounds minor, but it is a big deal. If I'm posting an activity and I have an error, then we really want you to have that set to stop and show the error so you can resolve it. If you leave it until the end, you may have a more challenging time unwinding activity or trying to figure out. So stop, review the error first before we move on. And this is for receipts and shipments. Those are things that affect general ledger inside Business Central. So that's a setting that that comes in from my friend and colleague Kevin Fons. He's real passionate about that one, and so consider that when you're looking at setting up your warehouse if you're doing that for the first time. Item number 8, warehouse item tracking. So what we see here, and first of all, let me define what item tracking means in our terms for those of you that might be new to Business Central. Item tracking is the process that we have in the structure that we have inside Business Central that allows us to keep track of the lot and or the serial numbers for items or stocking inventory items. And I say lot and or serial because Business Central allows us to both capture the lot and track the lot and the serial simultaneously for a given item. We don't see it very often, but it is technically possible to be able to do that. Now you can see here that it's very configurable. In this case, I'm just looking at the lot number, and this this card or page that you see setup is a general setup. We can set up different options, and then those are applied to an item. And so these are accrue to items. In this case, I've said yes. We're going to track the lot specific information about that particular item. And there's multiple transactions here that we're going to track that on. It's very configurable into when that lot information will be required inside Business Central. And the one question, of course, is when do you need to turn that on, or why do you need to turn that on, and where? And there's a long conversation that we can have around that particular question. If you're a customer that requires, for regulatory reasons or some really stringent business requirement, to track your information for lot numbers down at the bin level, please don't forget to make this next change, which is right here, lot warehouse tracking. Once I have activity posted against an item in Business Central, if I need to make a change into this area, it's a bit complicated to do. Nav treats this pretty rigidly. Once I turn it on and assign it, it kind of stays with that item forever. You can, of course, delete your inventory and start over again for that particular item, but it does take some work. So try and think this through in advance. And if you need it down at the bin level for whatever reason in your business, then make sure this gets turned on before you have items with this setting in your setups. Now this one is, I've just called it for this purposes of this presentation today, lot all FIFO. So the item itself will be lot tracked. It's all transactions associated with anything related to that inventory item, and we're doing a first expired, first out picking strategy. So this is about as complex as it can get inside Business Central. And the way this manifests is, and here we're looking at a particular item, and on this particular item, I'm drilling down into the bin contents of that particular item. Now, the bin contents is how we look at where an item is in our logical warehouse, in our physical warehouse. So where does this particular item reside in the warehouse? And these are all the places where it could potentially reside. So when I drill down into bin contents here in the system, then what I'll see is for this particular item, and you can see here we're looking at this lot all warehouse. That's just an item that I created for this purposes of today. I can see that in this location, which a white location is just something that we use for demonstration purposes. In my bin structure here is the various bins that I have. And so when I drill down into the bin contents, I can see in this bin, I've got 39 pieces. But if I look a little closer, I can see in this same bin, W030003, I have 2 lots, and that encompasses my 39 pieces. So if you're a customer that needs to really know exactly which lot number is in which bin and how much I have, then you want to make sure that you get that particular toggle set on the lot information card. Okay. Now I'm okay. Don't laugh at me. Here we go. This is 8-2. Yes, I realize I'm going to have more than 10, but this is something that was recently released, and I wanted to call specific attention to it. And that's back on my lot information card again. This is where we just were. Here you can see I have lot warehouse tracking turned on here, but there's another toggle which is called create lot information. So those of you that are on Nav or were on Nav, you'll recall something called the lot information card. Well, when Business Central was released, that lot information card kind of went away. And there's a couple points here. First of all, when it went away, partners and customers alike gave some feedback to Microsoft saying, hey, we need that. You can't take it away. And oh, by the way, we don't want the we don't want that taken away with the automatic creation. So that feedback was heard, and it was added back in. So this is a relatively new feature. It was added. I got that information. This was added in version 2021, Wave 1, which was in April of this year. And so now, with that setting, the lot information card will be automatically created. Now, where does this get used? The lot information card is valuable for doing testing on a particular lot. There's very much a low-level testing that we can assign for testing lots on the inbound side. It is not quality control by any stretch of the imagination. We may need to capture some certificate information or change the description, something like that. This also would serve as a great place for additional customization. If you have additional information that you need to capture about a specific lot, then that could easily be added as an extension, as database fields, and we can capture the information there. And so we're glad to see that back. It was released, as I say, in April of this year. You can see here that we can capture notes. I took some notes here and edited a note yesterday when I created this. And so it's a great place for additional information, and we're glad to see that back. Now, along those lines, I also want to digress for just a second, and I want to show you something here. The question is, how do I know what's coming? How do I know what's been introduced? If I haven't fully installed the new release yet, and I want to read that information, where do I go find that? So I thought it'd be nice to just take a quick look at where we get that information. So let me click on this hyperlink, and this will take me out to a web page. And this is an overview of Dynamics 365 Business Central release Wave 1. So these are all the things that were introduced within a particular wave, is what we call the releases now, or major releases now, that are semi-annual. April and October is what we've been seeing so far. This particular page is from April of last year, so it's all archived, and you can see here that they talk about that. There is a link to what's coming. So if I click here, I can see what's coming up, and this will take me out to stuff that we can expect to see and when we might expect to see it. Right. So here you can see this was the preview date. This was the preview date, and this was when it was generally available. And we see that for each release that's coming up. If I wanted to quickly know, hey, what do I expect to see in a new release? For those of you that are on the Business Central SaaS environment, you get automatic updates. This is a chance for you to start to learn about the updates and understand what may impact you. For example, on the most recent update, there was a change to the way cross-references are used, and you might want to read about that information ahead of time. Here's the information about what we just looked at, which is the automatic creation of lot and serial number information cards, right? So this will drill down into some more details around that particular topic. So Nice place to go. I'd bookmark that. You can always come back and learn about what's coming up well in advance. Now, fair warning, and they warn us here that not everything that's on these pages will necessarily make it into the product, and so you have to wait until the general availability comes out to see specifically what's there. So it's a good place to go check. It's nicely organized around the features that we can expect to see. Okay, so 8-2. All right, so number 9, bin thoughts. So this is kind of general thoughts and specific to Business Central setup as well. So here I am in my white location, the white location we frequently use for demonstration purposes. So you can see I've got items here. I'm looking at the bin contents again, and these are specific items and which bin they're located in. Now, this first comment here, designate row as a default. This W00-0000, it's probably not a bin that you would use for picking from, but what we've seen and what is recommended, and I thought this was pretty clever, thanks Kevin, is to create a bin code which represents the row. Now you can see here right now I've got these 2 products and they're in this bin code, but it really is representing the row. So the default flag for this particular item is set. So when I'm putting things away, the default recommendation will be this row somewhere, right? So we know we generally want to keep that item in that row, and then the worker or the business process would know, find an open spot to put it away. So when they're registering a put away and saying, hey, I put this product here, if I'm using paper-based, it'll show up as suggesting going to that row. But then when I actually register and say, this is where I put it, then I would tell the system exactly which bin it got put away in. It's a nice way of streamlining the put away activity without having a rigid enforced put away if you want to keep things generally grouped together. So it's a great suggestion that came in, I guess I say from Kevin, and something I hadn't thought about before, but something that you could certainly set up when you begin to design the structure of your bins and your put away strategies. Of course, if we're using the full advanced settings in Business Central, the directed put away and pick, then you might you would have a different structure where the default would be an actual storage bin. So that's the bin that is going to be suggested every time I have this product to put away. Of course, depending on how you're configured, the worker can change that if need be if the bin is full, but that gets into capacity planning. Again, that's a conversation for a different time. And then something as far as a specific setup, again, this is a suggestion from Kevin, define a default before receiving, or else the receive bin is assigned. So that's something that I had not heard before. In other words, if you have an item, and on this item, we can define certain rules about where we store this item, make sure that you have a default established. Otherwise, the receiving bin is going to be what's suggested as the default for the item. That means when we pick or go to register, or go to pick an item and have a pick ticket created, it's going to send us to that default bin to begin with, and that may not be where we have the product stored. So this is a very specific thing. Make sure that we have a default set before you start receiving a new item for the first time. After you receive product, then it will not be an issue, but it's for a new item the very first time it's been received. And there's a couple of general thoughts about bins. Lay out your bins and rows with an attention to sorting and walking paths. Remember, walking is the most expensive transaction in the warehouse. So understand how data is sorted inside SQL Server so that the bin labels are designed in such a way that pick tickets can be sorted to optimize your walking path. There are some other strategies to define a different field to use for what we could call bin sorting, to define a different path. But out of the box, think about how you do that so that we sort the pick tickets, and define a very optimized walking path. And the other one, barcode bins early and test before installing the barcodes. This kind of relates more to if you're moving to a wireless environment. Don't wait until the last minute to get your barcode bins labels put on there. And before you put them all on there, please test them. Test them for whatever short distance or long distance that is going to be most common or used, so that you know that the scanners you are going to be employing can scan the barcodes and that they're not printed incorrectly. Sadly, I have an experience with a customer that labeled everything, never tested, and the barcodes that they paid for wouldn't scan. So test them, make sure they work before you install them, and do them early on in the project. If you're establishing a new location or new warehouse, don't wait until it's too late. Also, make them human readable as well as barcode scannable, so that someone can see them as well. Obviously, I think that's important. Okay, 10, this is a new feature, and this is something called the inventory receipt and the shipment screen. Inventory receipt, inventory shipment. This is, it is brand new, and I'm curious where this is going to be employed and how it's going to be employed. Just some thoughts. I believe that you could use it, and Microsoft is recommending that you use it to load startup inventory. I could also see it being used for unsolicited customer returns. I recall a project a little while ago where customer receives returns, or my customer received returns from their customers, and without an RMA. It was their business practice to allow for that. Well, Business Central wants to have a document, or before this release, wants to have a document to receive against. I have to have an incoming transfer or a purchase order, or a real sales order return document in order to receive against. So there are some other screens that I could use, an item journal if you're familiar with that, or a warehouse item journal. It is a low-level journal that I can do adjustments and various inventory balancing transactions with. We don't necessarily want to have the warehouse folks working in that area. So I think this might work nicely for that, at least on the inbound side. And then also for write-offs, the shipment could be controlled, or the shipment, inventory shipment could be used for that. And then what I like about this screen is that it gives us a nice audit trail. It gives us a posted document. In fact, what you're seeing here is one I did yesterday called the posted inventory receipt. And so I have an auditable document that can be reviewed if I've got to question any of this. So this is new. I kind of like it, and I do want to take a look at that for just a second. So give me just a moment, and we're going to go actually into Business Central so I can show you a couple of things. Okay, over here. Okay, so this is a live Business Central environment. And first of all, let's go look at that posted transaction. So this is that posted inventory transaction that we just looked at. And a couple things I wanted to point out is that there is a general business posting group. For those of you that are not familiar with that, posting groups is how we control document level general ledger posting choices. We don't want users to make those choices. We set up activities, or we set up documents and various activities to accept what's set up on the various posting groups. So we can control which GL accounts are hit by this activity through the use of the posting group. So that's nice. There is unit cost here exposed. So you'd have to make a decision on whether you want that exposed if you're doing this down in the warehouse. What's nice is I do get a chance to receive and put things away directly on this document. So if I know exactly which bin I'm putting it in, I can. Obviously, for an inbound receipt like this, and if I'm going to do an inspection of the item, if it's an unsolicited customer return, for example, and I'm going to inspect these before I put them into live inventory, then you might have a bin, which is kind of your quality control bin and so on. And then for those of you that are familiar with Business Central, dimensions is how we further categorize the financials type of activities associated with them. The dimensions are exposed here on this document. So, and there, of course, there is room for ad hoc notes if I needed to take some notes about this for someone else who might be reviewing. So it's an interesting screen. As I say, it is new, and I think that it could be used in a variety of different circumstances out in the warehouse instead of using the other journals. Okay, back to slides here, just a moment. Okay, so that's the document we just looked at, and then finally, I have the last slide, or coming up to the last slide, is yeah, I know it's number 11. I came up with it when I was working on the slides last week, and I realized I needed to have this in here as well. And when it comes down to it, to improve your inventory for all the right reasons, use a wireless solution. I mean, your pick accuracy approaches 99.9%. As long as the barcode is correct and you're scanning items when you pick it, it's pretty hard to make a mistake, unless someone scans the barcode and grabs a different item. And in that circumstance, most of the wireless solutions out there allow us to present a picture of an item on the device as we scan it. So if I've scanned the right barcode and I grab the wrong item, hopefully I can notice that by looking at the picture or comparing the picture on the device to the thing that I'm holding in my hand, right? So your pick accuracy just goes almost 100%. You can argue some of these statistics. These are values that I've kind of gleaned from various publications over the years. And I'm hesitant to say that you're going to get a huge stock reduction. I would expect to get about a 10% stock reduction when you move to wireless. You're carrying a little bit more inventory because of inaccuracies. And if we're doing a good job on the planning side of inventory, we should expect to see a reduction by better picking accuracy. I'm using a fairly conservative 20% material handling improvement there. I have seen publications that are higher. Quite honestly, most of those are from the vendors themselves, and there's some more objective publications that lean toward that 20% number. So we should see an improvement in material handling, no question, by moving to wireless. And this last one I really couldn't stress enough is 50% reduction in physical inventory costs. So if you're hiring an outside service to come in once a year and do your physical inventories, or maybe half your inventories, that's a big expense. If you're shutting down your warehouse to do physical inventories, that is an opportunity cost expense. So by moving to cycle counting, moving to wireless devices, and a systematic way of doing those physical inventories or through cycles, you should see a substantial reduction in your physical inventory costs. And so that's something that we really would like to see you do, move to a wireless solution. There are a lot of great solutions out there. In fact, my next slide here, and this is coming up to my last slide, is kind of a listing of the wireless solutions from various vendors that we at Innovia work with. Some of these, Tasklet Factory, InsightWorks, Lanamace Warehousing, those solutions that are what I would call built inside the box. They leverage the core activities that are inside a warehouse to process, and they take advantage of those. The other solutions, FastScore, generic solo chain without wire, ProCat, those are solutions that live outside of the Business Central environment. They live in a different database. They're integrated to Business Central in various ways. There's some pros and cons of why you would choose one or the other over the other one. And again, that's the subject of a different conversation. So, oh, actually, I have a chat here. Question. So, all right. So, pros and cons. Sure, I have a few minutes. I can address that. So, thanks for that question. First of all, so the pros and cons. Integration is generally a bit more expensive, but the external databases also generally have more full features. So if you've got a complicated environment, if you've got a super high volume warehouse, then you might want to consider having one of the external solutions. Just recognize that the cost of that going in is going to be higher because that integration has to be created. The first three all live inside the Business Central environment. From a database perspective. So the integration has been done by the vendor. They're all great solutions, but maybe they don't have all the features that you would need for your warehouse. One that comes to mind that almost all have added is license plating. License plating is very in the last 10, 15 years has become used far more, even in smaller businesses that see the advantage of using license plating. The good news is they've all built it in here into various degrees. I think the biggest differences to me is the integration and the overall cost. The first three, Tasklet, Warehouse Insight, and Ace Warehousing, are going to be less expensive than looking at the other solutions. Again, but there's a feature and function. So to me, those are the biggest differences. We could drill down deeper. It all comes down to what your requirements are, and thanks for asking that question. Okay, so item tracing. Sure, I have a second. I can go take a look at that. Just a moment. Let me change back into Business Central here. Now, what you're seeing here is my homepage, or we call it a role center. Item tracing is that feature within Business Central that allows me to look at the lot or serial numbers for a particular item, cradle to grave. I don't know how much demo data I have in here. Let's just take a look. Okay, we have that item that I created yesterday. Lot all warehouse. That should have filtered down there for me. Okay, here's the item. Click on that. Now, when I trace, okay, so this screen shows me cradle to grave what's happened with a particular lot number. You see here in the filters, I can filter for a serial number, I can filter for a lot number. So if all I had is a lot number of a product, then I can see all the items with that lot, and I can choose whether I'm tracing from how the item has been used to where it came from, or if I reverse that, I can see, hey, where did it come from? And let me rechange. Although I don't have much data here, I did not do a purchase order. So if I had more demo data here, what I would see is the purchase order receipt where this lot number was received, and then any other activity. So yeah, the item tracing page or screen is where I can find quickly information about a particular lot number. Obviously, the first thing that comes to mind for those of you that are in foods is a potential recall. If I needed to quickly find all the customers that were impacted by a particular lot number for a particular item, this item tracing screen is where I could go do that. So, okay, thanks for that question as well. I always appreciate it when we get questions. Okay, Joe, I don't have the Q&A thing. I have chat. Is there any other questions that I missed?
No, it appears we don't have any additional questions.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, let me go back to slides here. Okay, so that's the any questions screen then. So we got that. Once again, here's me. Thank you. my email address there, jaugustine@inovia.com. There's my direct line, 949-203-5885. Please feel free to reach out with any questions that you may have. I know we get shy on these webinars. Happy to take any questions directly if you'd like. And check out our upcoming events, inovia.com/events. In fact, let's do that together here real quick. Show my taskbar. Okay, and we will go there. Okay, so for upcoming events, slowly, there we go. You can see we like to do events here. We have a lot of events coming up. Fixed assets ones I'm going to be sitting through, but here I have Warehouse Flavors and Business Central. My colleague Andre will be presenting kind of a detailed description of the various levels that I kind of alluded to in my conversation earlier. This is going to drill down carefully into the various levels that exist inside Business Central to help you make a choice on which one you want. So bookmark this page, come back often and take a look at the various events that we hold. We do quite a few each month. Okay, that's it for me. My final slide is just to say thank you. I'll leave this one up for now. Thanks for attending. I appreciate the time that you spent with us. I appreciate your questions. Everybody have a great rest of your day. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Jim. And please feel free to contact Jim or anyone on the team here at Inovia if you have any additional questions. And thank you to everyone on today's webinar, or if you're watching on demand, we thank you for taking the time to join us. And just a reminder, we have training and workshops, as Jim said, coming up for you and your team. So for our workshops, please visit inovia.com/workshops for more information and register for the training workshops that best fit your role. And we also have the webinars coming up, and that's at inovia.com/events. And you can check out the complete listing that Jim showed you earlier there. And don't forget to check out our Inovia Conversation podcast with hosts Steve Woltz and Jeff Pergolski. You can find out about all the different platforms to listen to them on our podcast page, and that's at inovia.com/podcasts. And while you're there, you can check out our podcast library and be sure to subscribe to receive notifications when new episodes air. And we have some conferences coming up. For a list of all the conferences we'll be attending or hosting, please head over to inovia.com/conferences. I want to thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you at another Inovia webinar. Thank you, Jim.